Hello, Canada. This is OneSoccer Today for Wednesday, March the 9th, 2022. It's Adam Jenkins, Joshua Cloak of The Athletic, and Oliver Platt here with you to discuss, as always, some of the biggest stories in the world of North American, Central American today as well, and European football. And we will begin with an announcement. It's not a breaking news announcement per se, but it is an important note. So make sure you got your phone calendars out or a piece of paper and a pen. The Canadian Championship draw is tonight, live on OneSoccer from 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We will find out the opening round matchups, who will be taking on who, what could the potential David versus Goliath upset stories be, and a whole lot more with some special guests along the way. So make sure you're joining us tonight at 9 p.m. for that special occasion. And on the topic of the Canadian Championship, let's ask Joshua and Oliver to pull on their pundits' caps and make some predictions for us. Let's begin here, Josh. Who, if anyone, do you think has the best shot of making the Canadian Championship final? Does a Canadian Premier League team have a chance at not only making the final but winning the Voyageurs Cup this year?
I mean, yeah, to answer one of your questions, yes, I do think there's as good a chance as any this year that a Canadian Premier League team makes the final for a few reasons. I mean, one, Montreal will have been playing, regular Champions League games. And obviously, the Canadian Championship starts in a few months, but perhaps their squad is still going to be a little bit tired. Toronto FC, they don't look like an MLS playoff team right now. I don't think it's a given that they're going to be in the finals, as they have been in the past. And that leaves Vancouver. Do we really know a ton about them as a squad yet? So I guess there's all these kind of caveats that should probably prevent anybody from saying, yeah, this is definitely going to be a Toronto-Montreal or a Montreal-Vancouver final. Forge is a good team. Pacific have a bye through to the quarterfinals. And I just think, if not now, then when? I think there is a very good chance that we could see a Canadian Premier League team in the final.
And Ollie, the Pacific will be starting in the next round. They have a bye by virtue of being CPL champions. So that's one less potential upset for them, if you will, depending on who they might be drawing. Like Forge will have to play in the opening round. So do you agree with Josh that this could be the year, this should be the year that a CPL final or CPL team makes the final and could contest for the V Cup?
I wouldn't say should, but I think that Pacific pathway, I guess, is the way that we could see it happen, right? Like you said, Pacific is only going to have to face one MLS team in order to make the final, and maybe none if results go in a completely crazy direction. But you would think, right, their semi-final is going to be against an MLS team, but only one upset would be required there, and then whichever team plays Pacific, right, coming out of that first round is also only going to have to face one MLS team on their way to the final. So that would be the way it could go if it's going to happen, but we have to remind ourselves here that we're talking about MLS teams with many, many times the budgets of all the CPL teams and the CPL salary cap. And so they're fighting an uphill struggle. I think to have seen the upsets that we have seen, and not just Vancouver getting knocked out twice, but also Montreal have been run close on a couple of occasions as well. To see that kind of parity and the CPL teams be as close as they have been and actually get some results in these first 3 years that they've been in this competition, I think they've overperformed. I don't think many of us would have expected them to have the kind of success and be at the level that they have been at so far in this competition. So you never rule it out. But I think obviously the three Canadian MLS teams are going to be the favorites to be in the final.
But if we look at those favorites, sorry, just quickly, I think if we look at those favorites, Toronto FC is the team that they're perennially expected to be in there. This Canadian Championship seems like an excellent opportunity for Bob Bradley to continue to roll out his young players and continue to give them we know that he'll need to play young Canadian players. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this team that, again, is generally in the final, they probably wouldn't be able to, or they won't come out with the same kind of depth, the same kind of strength in their lineup that they would have in the past. So that's why I kind of wonder about TFC as well, which kind of gives that upper hand to some CPL teams.
We're just going to add, sorry, I'll go ahead.
It's a mental thing as well, right? Like these are difficult games. We've seen it with Vancouver where they're not having a good season. The Canadian Championship is their one chance to salvage something. They go into a game as a massive favorite where, all the expectation is on them to win. Mm-hmm. And the CPL teams have that complete freedom to, play with house money, right? And those are difficult circumstances to be in from a psychological standpoint, particularly if you're a very young team like TFC might be this year.
You play the game in your head. What if this, what if that, what if the penalty shootout went the way of Forge? They get through CF Montreal. Maybe they beat TFC and then they're playing Santos Laguna in the first round in this world where everything goes to chalk, and they could be still playing in Champions League. That is how important this national championship is. So we also look forward to seeing Guelph and Outremal from PLSQ making their debut this year, or the return this year as well. So it'll be fantastic to see some new faces and some new sides in the competition. On the topic of the MLS sides who will be competing in the Canadian Championship, things aren't going super hot on the MLS front for those sides, as the Major League Soccer has unveiled its power rankings for the week, and it's not particularly kind to the Canadian teams who, to be fair, haven't really given the voters a whole lot of reason to believe that they should be in the upper echelon. Let's start with CF Montreal, who comes in the highest at number 17. 2-1 loss, of course, to Philadelphia Union on Monday. We talked about some of the things that went wrong that week. They got a tough week ahead. There's no doubt about it. They're in Champions League tonight against a formidable Cruz Azul side. And then they head to face NYCFC this weekend. So who's ranked number 3 in the power rankings. What is more important, do you think, Joshua, for CF Montreal right now in a busy week? Do you put your focus on Champions League, or do you try and get your momentum on the MLS side rolling a bit?
Oh, I think you have to put your focus on Champions League, right? Especially given that, the MLS season is long. They've only just gotten underway. There's lots of time. There's a lot of depth in this Montreal team. I think this Montreal team does have the ability to surprise some people. There's a lot of young quality in this team that can kind of feel their way out through the season and can kind of grow into the season. So if I'm Montreal, I look at the games ahead. The beauty of any kind of tournament like the Champions League is that anything can happen. Right. And if you can put your best lineup into the game that, does have an opportunity to allow this team to build some confidence too. If you go down to Mexico and you get a result, I mean, the knock-on effect in MLS could really that could be something special. But I do think in a kind of a knockout round, you have to kind of play the games in front of you. And to me, that's where I would be putting my focus. Again, the blueprint is there with TFC in 2018. Yes, they really faltered through the MLS season because they put so much stock into the Champions League, but they got close. They got really, really close. And I think that's something that I'm sure Montreal is looking at and saying, in these kind of knockout rounds, we have the quality. Let's focus on these games that can have a much bigger impact for us just as a club, right? Just for the stature of their club.
Yeah, I'm never going to sit here and say that a Canadian team or an MLS team should not take the Champions League seriously. I always want them to go for it in the Champions League. I think this competition is essential for the future of kind of North American football and how it's going to grow. We need a continental competition that's taken seriously, that people take as the top prize that you can win in club football in this region. We're not there yet, and we probably won't get there until the competition's restructured and some of the things that create some of the imbalance that's there now are kind of resolved. But I think we can take a lot of pride in this country in the fact that the Canadian teams have done very well in the Champions League in general, and have had some really special runs that I think have created, some of the most treasured memories that those fan bases have. So I'll never discourage a Canadian team from going for it in the Champions League. I hope Montreal do. I think they're good enough to go on a run. Could it have consequences for their MLS season? Yeah, possibly. And that is the danger of it. But you also don't want to make that a self-fulfilling prophecy and start worrying about that before it's even actually become a thing.
Absolutely. That match we will show you, tonight live on OneSoccer following the Canadian Championship draw. Cruz Azul and CF Montreal. Looking forward to that. Let's move to the next side in the MLS power rankings. A little bit lower on the totem pole, but not all doom and gloom at the minute for Vancouver Whitecaps, especially for the young man in goal, Thomas Hasal, being named to the MLS Team of the Week. That hasn't been the problem as much as their inability to score. Now, they'll be taking on Houston Dynamo this weekend, who is also yet to score a goal. But, Ollie, are you pretty confident in saying you're going to take the under between number 21 Vancouver Whitecaps and the Dynamo?
If I was to bet on the under, then it would be a 3-3 draw or something, a 5-4 win one way. So maybe I'll do that to spice things up. But yeah, it's been a struggle, right, for Vancouver. Obviously, I'm hoping we'll see Brian White back in their starting lineup this weekend, and that could help. But I don't think the problems are just at the top end of the pitch in terms of the finishing. I think when you see that one shot on target stat, you have to look at how they're creating chances as well. And the reality has been, through the first two games, it's very difficult to figure out who is going to create those chances beyond Ryan Gauld, who, when he gets on the ball, when he gets a set piece opportunity, he can make magic things happen with that left foot of his, and he's always a threat. But you can't rely on one guy. You have to have the wing backs creating more. You have to have the strikers working off each other more than we've seen. You have to have a central midfielder who could put his foot on the ball and spray passes around. All of those things have been kind of lacking for Vancouver so far this season. So there's a lot for this team to do, I think, to get to where they need to be and get back into the kind of form they were in the second half of last season. But it's all, for me, revolves around their play in possession with the ball. Just hasn't been good enough so far this season. And maybe against a team like Houston that has struggled in the same way, there's an opportunity for them to see some improvement in that side of their game.
So, I mean, what's the answer? Like, is it more squad rotation? Right? Like, I genuine question. Like, what would you do, Ollie?
I think, well, firstly, I think if they're going to bring another player in of significance, I think it needs to be a midfielder who can put his foot on the ball and dictate the game a little bit more than anyone they've got right now. I think getting Caio Alexandre back would probably help. He's someone who could inject something into the team. I think system-wise, there's still real questions, about how Vanni Sartini is going to approach it and what is the best approach for this team. I'm still not totally convinced by the wing-back system that he's brought in this season. So there's all kinds of things. Like I said, I don't think apart from Ryan Gauld being good, you can really say that anything is a finished product or in great shape right now.
It's difficult. I mean, that kind of attacking midfielder that you mentioned, that's the player that they've been looking for a very long time, right? And it's a difficult player to find. It's a difficult player to bring in kind of mid-season. It's a difficult player, or it's a difficult position to ask a player to kind of adjust to and just jump into at this point in the season. They're the team that I think just still has the most questions, right? Just about what they're going to look like. I think we know the style of play that TFC want to kind of put forward on the pitch. I think we know the kind of quality and depth that Montreal have, but there's just so many questions with Vancouver. And that's kind of what makes them such a fascinating team to watch, because I also, as you kind of mentioned, Ollie, I don't know if we're going to see those or get any answers to those questions anytime soon.
All right, we'll have to move on now to the Reds. They are last, and in this case, they are least as well. Number 24 in the MLS Power Rankings. Defensive woes have plagued them. We expected as much, maybe not the lopsided scoreline this early, but it's to be expected when you're giving a lot of young prospects an opportunity to ply their trade at the professional level. 4-1 to Red Bulls. Josh, are you disappointed in their early results? Are you okay with it for some of the reasons I just laid down and the expectations that a lot of people rightfully placed on where they would be until Insigne arrived?
I mean, I think you could be both. I think you can be disappointed in the way that they've looked, but also understand that this is just kind of a drop in the bucket for what this team wants to be. I think if you're looking for signs of encouragement, it's that they, even though, they looked pretty bad in that first half, they didn't necessarily, they still showed that kind of team spirit that was really, really lacking last season. It's interesting, you watch that game, you watch that first half, and you're kind of reminded why their former coach, Greg Vanny, wanted to, rightfully or wrongly, rely on veterans so much, because, when things got ugly, when they went down 2, there was just so much experience in that squad that they had those kind of games that they could fall back on, and they knew how to kind of get their way out of that trouble. That doesn't exist right now with this young team. You could just see it on there in the body language of these young players, right? When they go down 2, they go down 3, they're looking around saying, what's next? What do we do? Right? Because they don't have those experiences to fall back on. They haven't kind of built up, I guess, mental fortitude is the right kind of term, in terms of, what they need to do to kind of press forward. I think Jaquil Marshall-Rutty, I know we're going to talk a lot about him today, and we're probably going to talk about him a lot this year, but
anytime you're on, Josh.
Right. These are the kind of growing pains that are expected. Jaden Nelson as well, right? When you're playing, young players in new positions, these are the kind of learning experiences that have to happen, right? And they were pretty glaring. But if you're going to move a player out of a position, and if you're going to play young players, you have to expect these kinds of results. I think it was just kind of the avalanche of goals in such a short amount of time that really caught a lot of people off guard.
Ollie?
Well, I agree with all of that, but that's going to be the That's the challenge, though, right, Josh? Is that they've got Lorenzo Insigne coming this summer, and all of a sudden things are going to get very win now very quickly. And the question for me is this team going to be ready for it? And are these young players going to be ready for it? Because, like, Greg Vanney used to get a lot of criticism at times, despite all the winning he did, about the fact that he didn't play enough young players. And I think when you look at, what some of the young players that he was criticized not for playing have gone on to do or not to do in their careers since leaving TFC, and then you look at the results of that he was able to achieve with what was a veteran heavy squad, and then you look at the struggles of the team and how difficult it can be to blood these young players. I think it's hard to look back and say he was wrong. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, obviously putting their academy players in the lineup and giving them minutes. I'm all for that, and I think there are at least a few young players who have real promise and real potential and are ready to play now. But there's a lot who are going to need time. And by time, I'm not talking about weeks or months here. We're talking 2 or 3 years to really come through. So that for me is going to be a really challenging aspect of this job for Bob Bradley, is that clearly they've put a lot of money into this academy. They want to use the academy. But it's not a quick process, and it's not a foolproof process by any means, that just because you have a good academy and you put all this investment in young players, you're actually going to get the end product. There's still, an element of a crapshoot to this. So balancing that with the demands to win now and to produce what's expected of a team that has Lorenzo Insigne at the front of the front three, that's going to be a real challenge, I think.
Well, and just very quickly, I think it's important that we don't put all the kind of strain on the young players either. I thought, what I saw against Red Bulls was a team that still hasn't figured out what to do in the middle of the park with Jonathan Osorio and Alejandro Pozuelo, right? I thought Michael Bradley was just exposed. I don't think he got enough support, enough coverage from his teammates. We know he's kind of not as fast as he used to be. So I don't think, Bob Bradley has completely figured out how to get the best of that midfield tandem. Two very talented players, right? I have all the time in the world for Jonathan Osorio. And I think Alejandro Pozuelo still has a very important role on this team, but I don't think they're being maximized yet. I don't know. I don't think even Bob Bradley knows what their role is going to be yet. So I think it's important that we maybe don't put all the strain on these young players as well, right?
No, for sure.
On the topic of young players, however, in a much more positive light, where there is still time to develop and improve, it is time for what is becoming a recurring segment on this show. What did Cloak write for The Athletic today? And what he wrote today...
I love a Cloak list.
Yes, me too. The title, Canada Men's National Team Top Prospects, Dual Nationals, and next on the depth chart, available now on The Athletic. Josh, give us the rundown, the synopsis of your piece, and then we'll dive into it a little bit further and talk about some of the players you've highlighted.
I just want to make sure that you do have a subscription, right, Jenkins?
Yes, I have heard of The Athletic before. I am a fan. I'm still dipping my toes in the water, but I'm aware of The Athletic, yes.
I appreciate that. Yeah, the idea here is just that, when you look at this men's team, which are they're in the 2022 World Cup. I think the question that I was kind of asked by a lot of people that are just learning about this team is this a fluke, right? Is this just kind of a great Cinderella story, or is this the kind of success that can be replicated in the future? And I think the answer very clearly for me is the latter. I think there's more quality and more depth, in Canadian men's national soccer than there ever has been. And it's a question that I've been asked by editors. It's a question I've been asked by fans. What does this next crop of talent? Because we know this is kind of a bit of a golden generation. Is this talent sustainable? And so what I set out to do was kind of, write about the players that I've kind of rate very highly, write about players that I think other, people in the industry rate very highly, and just kind of look at what does this men's team look like? What could this men's team look like in 2024, 2026? Where are the kind of holes that they're going to need to fill out? Where are they at their strongest? And who are these players that are really making a lot of waves, both domestically and abroad? And what I kind of learned was that, again, there's a lot of quality here. And if you're John Herdman and you're looking ahead to the future, you have to kind of feel good, because you're also finding that there's a lot of players in positions that maybe Canada doesn't have a lot of strength in right now. But come 2-3 years, if they continue to develop well, and I'm kind of thinking about the number 10 position in particular, there's a lot of reason to be excited here.
Muted myself. I try to mute and then unmute myself at the same time. I've always sort of proclaimed and believed that like this run is incredible. It's exciting, but it's ahead of schedule. It was never supposed to be this year. We could hope, we could cross our fingers that it would be, but this was always a long-term project that just arrived early. So I think you're right, Josh, that Herdman's got to be feeling fantastic to know that they're going to Qatar. They will be going to the 2026 by virtue of hosting it, but the future is really bright. Let's pick at some of the players you selected in this piece, and I'll get Ollie to chime in on whether he agrees or another name he might want to throw into the mix. And let's start with, which prospect are you most excited about in the long term from your piece here?
The name that keeps jumping out to me is Lucas Diaz, for a few reasons. Again, I don't know if Canada right now, the team that's going to go to 2022, I don't know if they have a pure attacking number 10 that can really create a lot of chances outside the box, play that final key pass, or even dribble aggressively into the box. And to me, Lucas Diaz, again, it's early, but he's a young player that I think could really step into that role as that pure number 10 in the future, right? He started playing in Sporting's Academy in Toronto, and it's interesting, Sporting's Academy, or Sporting CP's Academy, Portuguese club. They have, offices in Toronto, and they're right by where I used to live in Toronto. And I'd walk by on the way to the Portuguese bakery every Saturday morning, and I just kind of stop and say, I wonder what's happening here, right? I wonder, and you'd see flyers for this academy in the bakery, and lo and behold, Lucas Diaz is the first player to go from that academy into the Sporting system. And he's now playing on Sporting's B team. Really important. We know John Herdman likes his players to be getting really kind of difficult challenges in Europe and South America from a young age. And those are the kind of players that he likes to rely upon. So for me, Lucas Diaz, a player that can just dribble so aggressively into the box, is fearless kind of getting into the box. I think Canada could really use that type of player in the next few years. So he's a player that I'm going to keep my eye on over the next few years.
Ollie, do you believe that Lucas Diaz is such a red hot prospect that he could set off the fire alarm in your condo?
Oh, here we go again.
If anyone has any condos for rent, send them Ollie's way.
I'm on my way out.
He's on his way out. Okay,
physically and mentally.
I will come back to Josh for the next question. And then if you're clear, Ollie, please feel free to jump in. So there's a lot of talk in the piece, Josh, obviously and rightfully, for the future and what could be this golden generation for Canada. But are there a couple players or anyone in particular you think that could make an impact and be involved in Qatar?
Possibly, right? This is where it gets kind of tricky, right? There's players that have the quality to be on this squad, undoubtedly. Daniel Jebison is one. Theo Corbeanu is another that you would think they're playing in leagues right now where they've acquired the kind of quality, they've acquired the experience that you think they could make a difference or at least play in a World Cup. But the problem here is, there's so many players that have been part of this kind of Canadian program for so years and have sacrificed a lot to get to the World Cup. Do you want to bring one of those players out to ensure that, a dual national like Daniel Jebison can get into the squad? He's a player that, look, he's scored in the Premier League. How many other players, in the Canadian pool have done that? Really, really exciting prospect. Also, Canada has no shortage of talented forwards right now. So, maybe they don't need another player like him, but he's a player, he's a dual national that if he's played for England youth national teams. If you want him in the fold, does a spot in the roster in Qatar make a difference? This is where it's going to get really tricky for me, is how do you kind of integrate some of these young players into the squad over the next, 18 months, while also recognizing that there's a lot of players that have, again, sacrificed, worked very hard, done a lot to get to the national team where they are right now. So Daniel Jebison is one that we know Canada, we know John Herdman is really interested in bringing into the squad. Quite sure that he's interested as well, but I think he's just kind of biding his time on his decision.
Yeah, I want to give it a go.
I'll try my best. At this point, I would be surprised if any player, whether it's a young dual national or someone else who's not in the group right now, anyone who's not been involved to this point, I can't see them playing a major part in the 2022 World Cup. I just think the timeline is too small at this point. If there's someone on Josh's list that I think could have a real impact in Qatar, it's Ayo Akinola, because I still think that first player off the bench in terms of strikers is still kind of open, right? You've got Ugbo, you've got Cavallini. Akinola, I think, can come into that mix and potentially be at the front of that line if he he has a strong second half to the season at Toronto FC, I really rate him highly as a young player. So he's the one I'd look at. Certainly in the longer term, it's the attacking players that are interesting, right? Diaz, as Josh mentioned, Flores, if he chooses to play for Canada, Jebison, Corbanu. These are all guys who would seem to have some serious upside. At the same time, I think people need to be realistic here and understand that, Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David are still prospects or prospect age in their own right. We're probably not going to produce another Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David for a long, long time. So when you set your expectations as to for these young players, we need more Johnstons, we need more Osorios, we need more players of that ilk. Projecting any of them, in my opinion, to be up at that level of the top two players that Canada have is unlikely. Those players just don't come around very often, and they already have come around in Canada's case in Davies and David.
On the topic of Alphonso Davies, after Bayern Munich's thrashing in Champions League 7-1 for Salzburg, we got an update from Julian Nagelsmann on Davies and when he expects to have him back in the fold. And the manager's response was hopefully by the UEFA Champions League quarterfinals. So, Mr. Joshua Cloak, are you anticipating seeing Alphonso Davies wearing the Maple Leaf when you head to Costa Rica in a few weeks' time here?
Not on the pitch, that's for sure. I would be shocked at this point if Alphonso Davies even trains for Canada, right? I mean, we're all going to be on a flight to Costa Rica in less than 2 weeks, and Alphonso Davies hasn't even started training for Bayern Munich. The key thing here, and I've mentioned this before, is, Julian Nagelsmann thinks he could have Alphonso Davies back for the quarterfinals, right, which start April 5th and April 6th. I don't think that was very subtle. I think the understanding there is that they need him to start training for Bayern Munich because, again, they have a real chance at winning the Champions League. Why would Bayern Munich allow if he's training again and look, he's not going to be at full fitness. It's going to take him time to get back to full fitness. Why would they interrupt his progression and his training, to go on kind of a flight across the Atlantic, play in some games that I don't want to, they're not meaningless to Bayern Munich by any means at all, right? But Canada's in, right? Canada's going to the World Cup. It's not like they need Alphonso Davies to get there. What's important is getting him back to full fitness, making sure he's healthy, making sure the player's, heart is working. That's what's really important here, and making sure that, Bayern can progress through. I think a lot of people rightfully want to see Davies there, at least to kind of just be part of the celebration. I wonder if that happens, but I'm not so sure that we're going to see him training or even be in a Canadian roster at all.
All your thoughts?
Might need you to filibuster for a bit longer here, Adam.
All right, well, I can do that because we're running low on time already. And look, if there's anything that a host on StreamYard, digital, TV, whatever the medium is meant to do, it's to dance and juggle and fill time until things are cleared. I'm getting a head shake, right, so unfortunately...
We're good. Oh, no.
No, we're not.
We're
okay.
No. Josh, clear. All good.
Go for it quick.
Davies, I think it's going to take a miracle at this point for us to see him play in the next international window. He still seems to be a week or two away from being fully cleared, fingers crossed at best. And so the timeline is just not going to work. But I can't see Bayern Munich, as Josh said, allowing him to interrupt what is essentially going to be a preseason for him to go and play games where, because he's not fully fit, he's going to be at a higher risk of an injury. So I don't think it's going to happen. Unfortunately, it's disappointing. I would really love to see him. I know the flight can be difficult, but to see him over there just to, take the plaudits and the appreciation for a moment that's so big for the sport in this country and that he has played such a big part in achieving. I would love to see him, even if it's not in Costa Rica, just in Toronto, right? To get that kind of reception, which I think he deserves. So hopefully something like that could happen, but I think we have to be realistic and say he's probably not going to be playing in these 3 games.
I'm going to give Canada Soccer $1 million idea at the game against Jamaica, BMO Field. Get Davies' Twitch stream up on the big screen. Get that going throughout the 90 minutes. Guaranteed entertainment.
There's always a seat for him on OneSoccer. I'll throw that one out there.
There you go.
I'm happy to give mine up as well.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say it would be an improvement, but it would certainly be a different
it would be an improvement.
Punditry. Josh, on Monday, speaking of joshing, on Monday we talked about the the atrocities from Liga MX over the weekend, and it's really taken the footballing world by storm, especially in this part of the world. And there's a lot of pundits who have a much better understanding of CONCACAF and Mexico. So I don't want to wax poetic on my thoughts too much, because if you want that information, those opinions, you can find them. Football Americas, the guys there did a great debrief on it. But what I do want to talk about and get your overall thoughts, Josh, is the punishment that has been handed down from Liga MX. And of course, if you somehow missed the story during the Atlas and Querétaro match, there was violence in the pitch or in the stands that drove supporters fearing for their safety onto the pitch in the middle of the match. I mean, there are awful visuals of fathers and mothers hiding their children, laying over top of them so that these hooligans wouldn't see them wearing the wrong jersey and fear for their safety. So what was handed down from Liga MX was a 1-year ban for supporters for Querétaro, and their ownership group will be banned from league-related activities for 5 years. The club will be returned to its old owners, which is Grupo Caliente, which is a massive sports book in Mexico. You'll see Caliente all over the Liga MX branding. And their task is to sell the club by the end of the year. If not, Liga MX will step in and take ownership. And the Barras supporters group there, they've only been banned, I think, for 3 years. So I guess that's my way of showing my bias, thinking they didn't go nearly far enough. We knew something was coming because Liga MX officials were said that they were worried that if they didn't do something, that they could genuinely lose the World Cup hosting rights. So a lot to unpack there, Josh. But what is your overall thoughts on the discipline and what we saw this weekend?
Well, my thoughts first and foremost are with the victims, right? You're right. You talk about parents kind of shielding their children, and you don't need to be a parent to appreciate just how horrifying that is. I think this is just yet another question about the state of kind of Mexican football and what needs to be done to ensure that people are safe and people feel comfortable going to matches. The words lifetime ban always kind of carry a bit more weight for me. So you wonder if that's something that could have been done. They had to do something. We, at The Athletic, we have 2 writers down there working on this story right now. And I encourage, people to check out their work. But certainly for me, the words lifetime ban carry a little bit more weight. And you wonder if that's something that could have, that maybe should have been done.
Ollie, you ready? You ready to try? No, thumbs
Yeah,
down.
sit
Okay.
this one out, guys. I'll echo what Josh had to say.
All right. Unfortunately, that is where we will leave it for Ollie for now. But hey, we will get that fire alarm started. Don't you worry. But lots more to be excited for today on OneSoccer.
It's going to be some strong words, Had. I can assure everyone.
Everyone is welcome to contribute to the Google Doc that Ollie's going to write before emailing his condo man.
I would love to see what a strongly worded, just a strong words from Ollie. I'd love to see what that sounds like. I don't know if I've ever heard that before.
Still quite polite, but strong.
Yeah, I've only heard it once, I think, and it was in a co-ed soccer match. So I'm curious what fire alarm Ollie can produce. That's it for us today on OneSoccer Today. Canadian Championship draw live at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Then, of course, CF Montreal and Cruz Azul in leg 1 of the Champions League, the next round for the Canadian MLS side. So we'll be excited for that from 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Josh, Ollie, thank you. We will see you all again for OneSoccer Today tomorrow, and then our roundtable on Friday.